Welcome everyone to NASCAD Artwork Alumni Talks. While our NASCAD community is a global one, our school and by extension our talk today are taking place in Chibuktuk Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq Nation. We're honored to gather, speak, and make artwork here. My name is Molly Cronin, and I'm the host of Artwork. Each month, I have the opportunity to speak with two of our esteemed alum about where their careers and lives have taken them after their time at NASCAD. This month, I'm joined by Carol Hansen, BFA 1982, and Katharine Burns, BFA 2009. And we're going to be talking about the world of commercial art. So, Katharine, Carol, thank you so much for joining us today.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you. Happy to be here.
So to get us started, we'll do a quick introduction. We'd love to hear a little bit about where you're based, what you're doing now. Carol, could you tell us a little bit about your art career at the moment?
Sure. So I'm going to be 70 in two months. So I have a very long art career. And as a result of that, I will be kind of switching back to the past a lot. But I graduated majoring in printmaking at NASCAD. And then I went on into the world of commercial art for 30 years as a soft pastel painter. And for the last 10 years, it's been acrylic painting. And I'm very lucky. Now, I hope I'm going to do this right. I'm very lucky in that I have two studios. One is in Chester, and I think I got to get rid of that. Share, no, there we go. One is in Chester, and you can see by the waterfront. And the other one is in Virgin Gorda, which is where I'm sitting. I'm sitting at this table right here. So, yeah, so that's about me.
Wonderful. Thanks, Carol. Katharine, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm an artist, an oil painter. I graduated with a Bachelor of Fine Arts from NASCAD in 2009. I currently live and work in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. I have, sorry, a studio on my house, which is where I am right now. I've been living as a full-time artist, living off my practice for 8 years now. And I'm currently represented by 3 commercial galleries, one in Toronto, one in Halifax, and one in Newfoundland. Right now, I'm working on some commissioned work, and I'm preparing for my next solo show, which will be my debut exhibition at Katzman Art Projects in Halifax. That's in April, and I just started working with them, so I'm excited about that. And then later in the year, I'm doing an artist residency program at Pooch Cove with another solo show at the end of that at James Baird Gallery. So James Baird runs the Pooch Cove Artist Residency Program. I've done it, I think this might be my 7th time, so I'm a regular there. So yeah, excited for this year.
Wow, exciting. Lots on the go for 2025. That's great. Well, let's take a little, step back in time. I'd love to hear about both of your time at NASCAD. So, Katharine, you graduated in 2009. Can you tell us a little bit about what you were doing at NASCAD, who you were working with, what your time was there?
Yeah. So, like I said, I took my Bachelor of Fine Arts. It was considered interdisciplinary, but my main focus was always painting, and I think I had enough credits to major in painting, but I did interdisciplinary because I thought, oh boy, like what job can I get after NASCAD? I'm gonna have to earn a living, so I might get into teaching. So that's why I did it that way. But yeah, strong focus on painting all along, and I worked with some of the professors I remember most are Rose Adams, Matthew Reichertz, and the late Susan Wood, which I was really sad to hear of her passing. She was a great professor. And yeah, so before leading up to NASCAD, personally, I didn't have a very robust art education through high school, and it was actually quite frustrating for me at the time because knowing all along my goal was to apply to NASCAD, and I felt I just wasn't getting the right preparation to create a portfolio, and was really just lacking proper art education, I found, leading up to NASCAD. And I was really, craving it. And luckily, my portfolio was accepted. I got into NASCAD, and my creativity just really flourished there. I couldn't believe that this was school. Like every day just revolved around art, and every day I was an opportunity to create, and my mind was expanding. And it was an incredible experience. It was, not only like immensely fun for me, but it just really challenged my creativity in ways, I'd never encountered before, and in ways that I really needed.
That's amazing. Thanks, Catherine. Carol, same question. Can you tell us a little bit about your time at NASCAD?
Sure. So I always made art, but I'm talking, the way a person like Catherine with no, I didn't come from an artist. Well, I came from a very artistic family, but nobody was an artist. And we were offered art in high school, but then it was a case of I wanted to leave home. And so I found a job, and believe it or not, I became a computer programmer. So this is when I'm from South Africa, and this is when I was still living in South Africa. So fast forward travel, end up in Nova Scotia, and find out that there's this art school called NASCAD. And I started taking evening classes, and Michael Fernandez was the main teacher, because I stuck with drawing. And let's see if I can do the share thing here. So stuck with drawing, and but of course at that point, no color, right? And I'm really loving it, but I'm craving, I want to learn more than that. So I actually then end up going to NASCAD full time, and I end up in printmaking. And I'm a very process person. I'm not artsy fartsy. So I don't like to just be, go in and explore. I need structure and whatever. So that's why I did not, of course I did painting, but painting didn't have enough structure for me. So as you can see, very drawing-like, even though it's an etching, and then it changes slightly. So as I learn more. So anyway, life went on. Don't want to get too lengthy here. Ed Porter in printmaking was absolutely fantastic. He had, like Michael Fernandez, they had that way of making you think in a wider way. But and what I loved with Ed is that you had to present yourself professionally, as relaxed as what he was. So you couldn't BS him, like and in printmaking, you can't make the art if you don't know the process. And it was done in a very orderly fashion. First it was this, then you got good at that, and so on. So that has stood by me really very, very well. In the future. Then what happens to me? Okay, I graduate, by the end of it, I'm doing stuff like this. I love drawing the figure in Michael Fernandez class, and it just went on to be the figure in printmaking. So I become technician. I'm now obsessed. I mean, I'm seeing no one, I'm doing nothing but printmaking. And then I apply for the Elizabeth Greenshills grant and graduate and do open my own printmaking studio. But I had to do all kinds of other jobs. I did some graphic art, believe it or not, for the seafood industry. Yeah, but then I make a big move to pastels. And that's because I have a baby and we moved to the countryside, and now I'm completely removed from Halifax. I don't know anyone, and I'm not from the country in South Africa. I'm from a very big city, but I'm just absolutely enthralled because now I have time. I've worked constantly up till this moment. Now I'm home. My husband is actually building his business. And as you can see, landscape starts to take over until eventually the figure completely disappears. And at that time, and I am still interested in, the houses, everything was so different from where I grew up. But I go to a meeting on the South Shore I don't know who put it together. And we have to bring our slides because this is before the internet. And lo and behold, I'm approached to become a gallery artist for a place called Houston North Gallery in Lunenburg, which was at that time the most prestigious gallery on the South Shore, which was quite the treat. And I was with them for 10 years. Finally, I exhibited not only with them because I couldn't manage their requirements, which was a solo exhibition every 2 years. Eventually, I am in other galleries. And then finally, after 30 years, I stop doing pastels. And Heather Sayu, you may know of her. She was a NASCAD painter. She wasn't, if she was there when I was there, I never met her, but she retired to the South Shore. And I started taking painting classes with Heather. And Heather says, you know, I like your flowers. And then this happens to my landscapes. And finally, I'm back into figures. And that leads to a solo exhibition, my last solo exhibition, which was a couple of years ago, which was now all full of figures. And there's a story behind that, but I won't get into that. So, so that is basically where I am. And my project is I opened a gallery in 21, which has completely taken me over. And I really haven't painted much in the last 2 years. So yeah, so that's my story.
So exciting to see the trajectory and like the span from
Me
NASCAD to
too,
now.
me too.
And to see the way the work kind of comes back to some earlier versions of
Yeah,
itself with the figures. So interesting.
yeah.
Um, well, we've got a little bit of an insight into some of the themes that you touch on, but Katharine, I'd love to hear the same from you. Can you tell us a little bit about what kind of imagery and themes that you're exploring in your artwork?
Yeah, so sorry, for almost a decade, I've been concentrated predominantly on the themes of the ocean. In my work, I like to explore kind of the various temperaments of the ocean. So thinking about, you know, how its ever-shifting nature can evoke different emotions and shape our perspectives. So through my paintings, I'm trying to explore the ways in which the ocean connects with us, the feelings it stirs within, you know, which provides a lot of contrast. You can have like awe and wonder, tranquility, turbulence, enlivening qualities. So through representation and realism, which is my style of painting, I'm trying to capture the seascapes on canvas, but really distill it down to its core subject, which is just a really tight focus on the subject of water. So it can be like a singular wave or the open expanse of water. My main focus is intentionally narrow. So no references to man-made structures like wharves or boats or lighthouses or anything to really allow the natural elements of water take the center stage. So nature's beauty really moves me. There's something about the raw power of our landscape that stirs a deep sense of awe in me. So it's that feeling of kind of being small in the face of something so vast and powerful. That's what drives my work, and capturing these moments when nature almost feels like unreal, and just reminding us how deeply connected we are to the world around us.
It's so interesting to see how both of you are representing Nova Scotia in different ways, right? With between landscapes and seascapes, and you've spoken a little bit, Katharine, about sort of what it is about that area that really speaks to you and speaks to the work. But just double check my question. Uh, can you speak about like where do you find that you're like, can you say more about the relationship to like what it's like to paint in Nova Scotia and what you love about working there and how maybe the people who are connected to your work, like what they maybe love or learn about Nova Scotia or the
Yeah.
ocean through your work?
Yeah, for sure. Like I've lived here. I've lived in Nova Scotia since I was a child, so obviously very deeply rooted in the province. And I'm constantly inspired by you know, the relationship between the land and the sea here. I find in Nova Scotia, like it's uniquely has a real sense of intimacy between the land and the sea. The ocean here can be wild and dramatic, but it's also like really accessible. As I said, I spend a lot of time in Newfoundland because I have representation there, and I love Newfoundland. It's one of my favorite places. The ocean there, it's not as accessible as it is here. It almost feels like, you know, you're a safe distance back and you're observing it. I find in Nova Scotia, you know, I have such a more personal connection with the water. I spend so much time in the water and on the water. So I kayak a lot in the summer months. And I get a much more intimate experience with it here. And there's so much like visual richness and variety in the province. So, you know, you have the rugged Atlantic coastline, which is, you know, against that granite rock. It's so different from like the beaches of the North Shore and like the coastline of Cape Breton and the cliffs and coves and sandy beaches. It's, you know, this province provides like such endless visual influence. So it's just like a perfect source of inspiration for my work. And I feel like really connected to the ocean here in a way that fuels my creativity and pushes me to explore and like translate them differently on canvas. And that's not to say that all my paintings are inspired by Nova Scotia, and most of them are, but you know, whenever I travel, I'm always seeking out the ocean. It's different too, like the ocean has its different personalities, like wherever you are. I think like if you've lived in Nova Scotia your whole life and looked at the Atlantic Ocean here, like you could recognize it in my paintings. Yeah. It's, you know, I think it's more so though just like a love of the ocean. We all share kind of a love of the ocean. That's you know, that's what's at the core. And, you know, as a universally loved thing, the ocean has almost like this magnetic pull on people. So when people visit the sea, like, you know, they all experience this like unique perspective. And yeah, I think I personally owe a great deal of my success to my subject matter for that reason. But I do hear all the time, you know, that my collectors are drawn to my work because it reminds them of home. You know, I'm represented in Toronto as well, so obviously nowhere near the ocean, but a lot of collectors there buy my work for that very reason, so they can have the feeling of the ocean there with them. The difference in ocean though, you know, like the ocean here has its unique kind of appearance. Like I said, it hits against granite rock on this coastline, so that the water is very clean and like clear and bright blue. You get those turquoise waves, and then, you know, if you're on a beach on the North Shore or something, it's pulling up all that sand and sediment as it breaks, so you get like a warmer you know, golden color wave. I did a commission for a California resort this year. And they're kind of right on the coast, Laguna Beach. And in the initial discussions, they told me which of my paintings they were most drawn to. And out of the hundreds of paintings on my website, they chose 2 waves that were actually based on photos that I shot just south of them on that same coastline. So unknowingly, they recognized their Pacific Ocean in my work. And I thought that was pretty neat, you know, how, you know, they're all paintings of waves and water, but they all have their own unique personality that's, you know, specific to their location.
So interesting because, yeah, as you said, like you're never really looking at the same ocean. It's always changing from second to second. But yeah, you can really, I think, know when you're home. And I feel very homesick listening to you speak about it, actually. So, Carol, can you tell us a little bit about what drew you to the landscape of Nova Scotia as you moved here and how Nova Scotia has become part of your art practice?
Oh, yeah, sure. So I grew up inland in South Africa, far away from the ocean, and going to the seaside for 2 weeks in the summer was a big deal, but it didn't look, of course, anything like Canada. And so, you know, you spend 20 years in the Southern Hemisphere, then you're you find yourself in the Northern Hemisphere, which is quite shocking. And I also came from a very densely populated area, and then I moved to the opposite. And with our move to Chester, with the birth of my first child, that was the extreme opposite, but it was incredibly solitary, but in the most positive of ways. I'm an only child, so I do lean in that direction. And I had this little baby that was a great little baby, slept a lot. And I just walked and walked and walked. Oh, he was a winter baby, so all seasons. And of course, was near the sea all the time. And like Katharine, was very taken in by the sea and its moods. How it's always moving. So even on a calm day, it will reflect light in a different way. The skies change so much in Nova Scotia very quickly. So for me, it's never ever boring. Because it presents itself in so many ways. My thing was the South Shore. Like I didn't travel that much elsewhere in Nova Scotia. But the other thing that I suppose also influences me is I am, by that point, I'd become a big gardener. And I did go on boats, but I was always happiest when the boat landed. I wasn't afraid of the water, but I would get a little bit bored. So I loved where water meets the land. And over time, I got to know more about the importance of the plants that are there where water meets the land. And then in my own gardening, how there were survivors, there were, and so the whole climate thing is very, very important for me. I still obsessively read what the weather's going to be like. I'm so fortunate in that much, much later in life, when my husband retired, that and our kids had gone, that we actually were able to come to an island much smaller than Nova Scotia. I feel like I'm in Chester. The whole island is Chester. It doesn't look like that, but you get to know everybody. And here I am able to paint down here, and every morning I do this hour-long walk, and it's just around these big hills, and it's ocean, ocean, ocean. So yeah, I really feel like I don't think I could live away from the ocean now that even though I wasn't born here. You really get to feel like you belong and you need it. So yeah. Oh, I was going to say something about, which is different from Katharine. Regarding people and how do they connect with my work, and does my work inform them about the ocean or whatever? Because I've always been in small town galleries right here in Nova Scotia on the South Shore, you're preaching to the converted. So people, right, even if it's their first time in Nova Scotia, let's face it, Nova Scotia is freaking beautiful. Yeah. So, they come in a gallery, they see your work, it reminds you maybe of where they've been or whatever, and they want to take it home with them. So the artwork has such a strong connection to memories. And so I guess that's why people want it, especially when it's realism,
Yeah. Well, that's what's so interesting about, I think, having the two of you is we've got Katharine, who's selling in both Halifax and Newfoundland and Toronto, and then we've got the very specific kind of art market you get on the South Shore of Nova Scotia, where you're selling, Carol. And I think that's a really interesting conversation to have about how these different, because commercial art isn't sort of like a monolith, right? Like that we're talking about different markets, we're talking about different clients, we're talking about different ways of viewing art. So I think that it's a really interesting pairing. And to that effect, maybe Carol, we could spend a little more time talking about selling work on the South Shore. You mentioned that you were represented by the Houston North Gallery when you first started out, and then you transitioned into running your own gallery eventually. But can you tell us a little bit about those years, about about how commercial art has kind of worked for you on the South Shore in that time?
So, when I graduated, now I was a mature student. I went to NASCAD at 24 and I'd had a career in South Africa, a very short one. I mean, I only worked 2 years when I went traveling. And then when I came to Canada, I worked in a fish plant. And I worked in that fish plant or fish store all through my art education. So I didn't want to go back to that. But of course, I also wasn't attracted to teaching. So I had to think about how I was going to make a living. I mean, I was with my husband at that point, but still, we didn't have any money really. And so the thing that I really think is advice to students is as soon as you graduate, you've got to keep making art. Like you've got to, it's like eating and drinking and sleeping. You can't do without it. And if you don't make art, preferably daily, but I realize if you have a job to go to and all that, you got to carve out a time and you have to stick to that time. So what happens is that you then inadvertently start building a portfolio. And in my case, I was determined to do everything. So, I did do a little bit of teaching, but I mean, I built my own studio, my printmaking studio. So that made me have to, I had shows in the studio and met the public. I did a little bit of graphic art. I'm arranging exhibitions in community centers. I joined Studio Rally, which again, people come to your studio. So all that was giving me confidence that when Houston North saw my work and met me, I wasn't a greenhorn, right? They could tell, okay, this person, you're going to be able to depend on them. If you're having a show, they're going to produce the work, they're going to give you the work. And they were very strict gallery. I mean, they laid it out very clearly. They were successful. They didn't need me to be I wasn't their breaking point, right? They need every artist, but there were artists in there that were way bigger than what I was. So, but it's really good that they still expected me to be professional. And the difference between commercial art and having your work in a nonprofit or university gallery is that kind of art is where you have the opportunity to talk about what you do. Whereas when you're in a commercial gallery, you're not there every day. And the gallery has to make money as well. So it is maybe a harder environment on artists. But somehow I responded to it. And, I did, as I've said before, I did that for 30 years. And I actually only stopped exhibiting. It felt fulfilling for 30 years. And I was lucky in that what I love to paint happened to be what sells on the South Shore. And so I never had to go through that thing. Well, I did have the experience actually. So I announced at one point, this was many years in, and I said, look, enough of the houses in the ocean and the fields and all that. And I, for some reason, wanted to explore still life. I think it's because of my involvement with plants. And the gallery owner at the time said, Carol, you are known for what you do. Think about it. And I was determined, and she very kindly let me do it. And it totally friggin' bombed because the people came, I'd gotten known for what I was doing. So that is one thing that is hard being in a commercial gallery, that people get to know you, and people now will say, oh, I can tell that Carol Hansen did that painting if I go to a friend's house and see it on the wall and that kind of stuff. But anyway, and I think that was part of opening a gallery towards the end. I had a 5-year break. My mom was very ill. I looked after her. She passed away. During her last year of life, I actually started taking painting lessons. It was too many years ago that I took painting. And that was the Heather Sayu thing. And I had a business in Chester, which closed because of COVID. And I owned the building. And I said, let's open a gallery. So, yeah. So that's the
Exciting.
whole trajectory.
Well, we'll come back. I think we'll come back to talk more about the gallery, but I'd love to hear from
Yeah.
Catherine too about how you sort of entered into the commercial art market and maybe a similar conversation that Carol brought up about how you balance sort of your inclinations and desire for innovation with the demands of a commercial art market.
Yeah. So yeah, I just have to say, like the term commercial art, like when I was asked to do this talk and I saw it in the title of the talk, it just like I found it interesting because it instantly brought me back to my days at NASCAD and when we were in classroom critiques. And I would often hear that feedback about my paintings that they looked too commercial. They would say, I would get the critique that it was like, okay, like technically like good brushstrokes, they're good, but it looks too commercial. It looks like something someone would want in their living room. And that was like a bad thing. That was like, having your work look commercial was something you wanted to avoid. So then I thought it was interesting. I read the talk and I was like, oh, there's that like commercial art label again. But I think, yeah, it's just, I think, yes, I've found commercial success working with galleries, specifically commercial galleries that, they're a profit run business. But like I consider myself, I create fine art rather than creating commercial art. Like I think of like graphic design or illustration, advertising, like branding, like all has great value, but I think it's something different than like fine art. So I think like the distinction would be like the purpose of the artwork. So, you're creating art because you feel compelled to communicate an idea or an emotion or an experience. And, as a fine artist, my work is driven by my personal vision and expression. That includes like my commissioned work as well. I maintain, pretty strict creative control in even my commissioned work, which we can revisit later. But yeah, selling my work in a commercial gallery, it's a way to connect with connectors and art lovers and curators who value, my creative expression and using the gallery as a platform and a means of sharing my work while also providing me with a living. So that has proven to be, the right template for me as an artist. It allows me to do my art while also, surviving, earning a living. And yeah, that's, there's no right or wrong path, I think, to take as an artist. Some artists prefer to, represent themselves, for instance. But I personally find this format that I've chosen works well for me, and I enjoy working with commercial galleries. And I believe, I benefit from them and still feel very fulfilled in my own art practice.
I think that's a really like interesting way to talk about it and an important distinction. And I think when my intention with the word commercial was to think about how you both are able to make a living off of artwork and how difficult that is and but I think we can definitely shift the language a bit and say and talk about selling fine art. I think that's more what we're actually discussing today between the two of you.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, so that I appreciate that distinction. What I really am interested in hearing a little bit more about how, we can talk a bit about the economic side of this a little bit, and you work with these galleries that offer you a lot of success, and then there's also, you mentioned these other kind of streams where you're kind of facilitating the work. I was curious about the use of social media because you have a very active Instagram
Mhm.
account, but you've also brought up commissions, and I'd love to hear about both or either of those other ways of kind of showcasing the work that you do.
Yeah, so I can talk a bit about kind of my trajectory and how it all happened. So I started out, and this was a while after I graduated NASCAD. It took me some time to, um, find my voice as an artist. And so about a decade ago, I submitted a few small works to Argyle Fine Art. They're a small gallery on Barrington Street in Halifax. She Adriana graciously offered me my first solo show there. I was very nervous. And this is, the first time I was doing seascapes. The show, it did very well. It sold out. I was, shocked and thrilled and, thinking maybe, this is something it would be a dream to like sustain myself off of my art, but this is a good start. And through Instagram, I started posting my stuff on Instagram as well, probably around that time, and kind of gathered a bit of following on there. James Baird in Newfoundland discovered me on Instagram, reached out, and I started working with him, a bit of a larger gallery. I kind of outgrew Argyle Fine Art, both, just in terms of, well, mostly like size. I like to work quite large. So I started working with James. I was, expanding my work, getting kind of a tighter focus on, my style and what kind of art I was creating, and also working larger. And he, at that point, I was working working full-time, doing my art part-time on evenings and weekends. And it was just clearly becoming not sustainable for me.
Mhm.
And it's very scary. It was a really risky decision to leave, a secure job and pursue this. But and at the time I was single. I was living by myself. I had student loans. I had, not much to fall back on. So it was very like, okay, like a huge decision and very like nerve-wracking for me. But at that point, the idea was kind of snowballing, and I think it was going to happen eventually. But working with James, he said, I don't represent part-time artists. I want to represent you. I like your work. I'm not going to represent part-time artists. And I said, okay, like I'm going to do this. And it's just, I had a show with him that, great success. My work did really well in Newfoundland. People received it very well there. And after that, started working with Abatzo in Toronto, who's also discovered me through my social media. So your comment about social media, it's been hugely beneficial. And it was just really great, and I got really lucky working with the galleries that I ended up working with, and now Katzman, who I'm new to, but it's, I think working with the right gallery that is the right fit for your art and for you personally makes a huge difference. And the galleries I work with, we have mutual respect and transparency between us. So it's, we have really good working relationships. And I think that's, very important for the artist and gallery to have, those relationships. And I believe, the commercial galleries, even though I have like a huge, pretty big social media following, which I can talk a bit more about, but the galleries, they provide, exposure and visibility, in addition to like the early guidance they provided me as I was like starting out. And they offer, kind of professional marketing and representation, and their endorsement of your work carries a lot of weight in the art world. They, can enhance the, perceived value of your work and the credibility of your work. They give you access to their group of collectors, put your work in front of the eyes of people that you might not be able to access through just social media or and they, it's like I said, in addition to all those, like it just having a good working relationship and having each other's back. And for me personally, it's worked well for my artistic career.
So it sounds like the social media has been a great means of connecting with the galleries and I imagine people across the globe, but that,
it's like, I don't know. I have like a love-hate relationship with
yes,
social media right now. Like when I first started posting my work on Instagram, that's when I got most of my momentum and my following was early on, when it was, just photos, and it was, it was the perfect like place for artists to post their works. It was just, you post a snapshot, you put a caption under it, and it takes off. And now it's, you know, video based, of course. And, you know, is a huge tool for visual artists. It's great free exposure. We should use it. It's basically like our public portfolio, and we can curate it how we want it to look. And it's, you know, a huge tool that we should use, but I find it's just very, for me personally, draining lately. It's exhausting for me. And I try to keep up. I try to, you know, post engaging reels and videos, but you have to be like a content creator now, and that's like a job in itself, and like a skill like any other. Like there's people that are just really good at creating content, and it's time consuming. Like for me, when I'm doing my studio work, it's like, oh yeah, shoot, I should be filming this. Like, so you set up a camera, and then you know, then you have to be aware of it, and you have to make sure you're not blocking the camera while you're videotaping yourself painting. And then, you know, you kind of forget, and you shoot a whole video and it's not good. And it's just, it causes stress. And like I said, it's a love-hate relationship. I want to present a good, you know, curated image of, you know, my art practice on my social media, but it takes more time now than it used to.
Yeah, all these other jobs that go into being an artist, hey?
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of which, Carol, can you tell us a little bit about the work you're doing now running the gallery? You've made that shift from practicing to facilitating a little bit. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So it's really good hearing Katharine speak from, you know, the artist's point of view, and how far she took herself, but it all takes time, right? When we hearing her speak now, it seems if you're straight out of, or you're still at NASCAD or somewhere, you're like, oh wow, okay, it can happen, and of course it can happen. So you know, I decide to open a gallery, and believe it or not, it's COVID, and so even though I have a tiny gallery compared to what Katharine's talking about, there's still similar problems that I'm sure even big galleries deal with, right? And unknown to me, COVID was, I don't know about for other people, but it was fantastic for artists. So I talked to so many artists who never had the opportunity to paint as much, or make art as much. They sold more than they'd ever experienced before. And I opened the gallery. And so opened the gallery, got a local, very sweet guy, Aiden Searle, I think his name was. He'd done beer cans and all kinds of stuff. You know, the flag goes up, the community's thrilled. We extend our hours, we have openings. I'm the hanger mainly, and I wrote the newsletter and I blah, blah. So, you know, we're hanging stuff. And as you can see, I'm not, I wasn't choosing boats on the ocean. And I'm not being negative about that. I mean, there's lots of galleries that do that, right? And anyway, so the gallery in 21, 22, I think I'm really good at this. And I expand my artists from, I started out with like 4 to 19, including myself. And then 23 comes, and the crowds disappear. And what had happened was people were no longer afraid to get on planes, and the economy's dipping. So I have to say it really freaked me out, because for me, a gallery doesn't pay my rent, but my husband and I fund the gallery. But I felt so torn. I want my artists to sell, because it is an ultimate thrill to sell. As Katharine pointed out, when you're at NASCAD, and I was there a lot earlier, and let me tell you, our painting professors were abstract expressionists from the 50s and 60s, and they to talk about selling your artwork was like you were prostituting yourself as an artist, which now we know is absolute BS, because you know what, you spend 4 years in art school and you go back to working as a waiter, but now you have an art degree. So that is, and I'm so pleased that NASCAD has changed that viewpoint, and that, you know, you're having shows like this, and I attend some of the work now. And I mean, it's just amazing what NASCAD does now, that to help artists to continue to make art. So I'm getting a little distracted here, but anyway, so even though my artists are, I did have artists that were emerging, but artists are so smart now because of the internet. So they're already promoting themselves. They're already interacting with the public and so forth. But anyway, here I am in this gallery that everybody loves on the South Shore, and I'm being told, oh, it's the nicest gallery and blah, blah, blah. But my God, it is so difficult to get people to, well, people were coming, but they weren't buying. You know, there's 2 years of fabulous selling just really started to tank. And then, you know, you start saying, oh, do I have to have more, even more commercial art that isn't challenging? As you can see, I really like abstract. I don't do abstract, but I absolutely love abstract. And I was determined that I was going to have abstract artists. So now, you know, we're trying everything. We're having artists coming in, doing talks and doing demonstrations. A friend of mine, not a friend, well, she is a friend of mine, but she's works with me. She was going crazy educating herself on social media. I mean, she was doing that full time. So Katharine, I know what you're talking about, how incredibly difficult that is. You know, I have some artists that are quite established, and they all said to me, wow, you sell more of our stuff than anybody else. But still, it was exhausting. And I got to a point where I was just worried about the gallery all the time. So from the gallery point of view, we have to, as Katharine said, we have to realize it's a business. In my case, I'm extremely lucky that it's something that I'm able to do in my older years, right? But even though I don't pay the rent with my gallery sales, it's crushing to have all these wonderful artists around you, and people are just not getting it. But I made a huge mistake. And my mistake was when I first decided to do a gallery, everything I read, and I did, boy, did I research, all said, what is your market? And I felt, no, if the art's good, it's good, they will come, right? And that is where probably where Katharine is doing well. Her work is wonderful, but she's in, as she said, you want to be in a gallery that appreciates you, respects you, but also knows how to sell your particular art. So that is where I realize now after 4 years that it is almost impossible to sell abstract art on the South Shore. The other thing is I had to finally suck it up and realize that people don't come to the South Shore to buy art. People come to the South Shore because it's beautiful. They want to be there. They want to go to restaurants. They want to go out. And if they happen to be art lovers, they want to go to a gallery. But so, you know, am I going to now no longer have abstract art in my gallery anymore because it's eating up wall space? Do I have to have more art that is what my market is, which is people who love the South Shore? And what we have to remember is people who come to galleries, to commercial galleries, are not the same people that go to public art galleries. Like when I travel, I go to public art galleries because I want the educational element. I want that thought process. People go to commercial art galleries. Yes, I know you can sell through that to a bank or a big business, whatever, but ultimately it's for their home.
Right.
And they don't want to talk endlessly about it. They just want something that's going to make them happy in their home. And the people who come to my gallery are not looking for a piece of abstract art. So yeah, so that's oh yeah, and the other thing that we've done is we've also involved ourselves in the community who love the gallery. They come a lot, but of course they're not the buyers, right? The buyers are HRM and the Americans. They've been fabulous. They've finally come back, and they will buy abstracted art, you know. But so we do things for the community. The children, as you can see, come through. Their teachers bring them. We're involved in the fundraiser where the local community decorates trees, and then they get to come through the gallery as well. And actually, you know, we have sold a few pieces during this period, which did surprise me. So yeah, that's my story of commercial gallery. And you've got to know, you've got to know your market, and the
Right.
artists have to also know what the market is.
Well, it's so interesting to hear you both talk about some of the kind of expectations around commercial art and where you kind of butt against that term, and then yeah, some of the realities of making and selling work, both from the artist and gallery perspective.
You'd mentioned something before that I didn't get a chance to respond to, and I'll just like talk about it quickly. Was the doing commissioned work?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I think I just wanted to say a few things about it because it is kind of interesting in that you know, regarding like autonomy and, you know, innovation in your own work. So you know, I do is potentially hard to avoid when you're accepting commissions, and I would say about 15 to 20% of my sales are commissioned. So in that case, like collectors will come to you, the artist, because they, you know, admire your existing body of work, which they understand and respect your artistic style. And if they don't, then I think what they are probably seeking is more like a designer or muralist, someone who works, you know, more within a specific rigid directive. But yeah, by me personally, by establishing early on, like my role is to create art within my style rather than creating design choices or adjustments based on, you know, their requests, then I lay out a foundation for kind of mutual respect and maintain creative control of the art. So yeah, when I'm working with doing commissions, they're in the end almost not distinguishable between my, you know, studio work. They are my work. So I'll start out by asking them, like, why do they like my work? Which of my paintings resonate with them? And then I ask them not to describe physically what they want the painting to look like, but also what moods and emotions they want the painting to evoke. So asking the collector to articulate it in that way is a crucial step in protecting my creative freedom in the commission. So it gives me the space to interpret their vision through my own kind of artistic lens. So then you can shift the conversation away from like a literal request, like I want a painting of X in this color palette, to more of a like conceptual approach, which yeah allows me to maintain the artistic autonomy. And I usually do, like for commissions, I'll do, based off that early discussion, do kind of these small studies. And it's like a small version that I've worked out based on our discussions, and usually is reference material that, you know, I've want to paint anyway. I have a folder of hundreds of them. And it's, you know, work that I want to do. As you can see, this is the study for the one behind me, a larger version. And, you know, then they choose, you know, what study they prefer, and the choice, you know, giving the choice to the collector between the different studies also empowers them to be a part of the creative process, but within my parameters, and ensuring the final work aligns with my artistic values. I know we didn't get a chance to touch on a commission, so I just kind of wanted to talk about that process and how I navigate, you know, market demands in that way.
I think that's really smart because it also helps kind of manage clients' expectations. Sometimes they have this
Yes,
vision of what
exactly.
something
It's
will
like, you've
be.
seen it. This is what it's
Yeah,
gonna look like.
I
Yeah.
have it in my brain, and now you make it.
Yeah, and
And
I've had like some interesting requests. I don't, paint their photos or other people's
right,
photos. I don't put in specific things. Like, I've had some requests, like, can you put the Coast Guard ship in there? It's like, so yeah, it's a pretty strict parameter. But again, if the collector admires your work and respects your work, then they don't want that anyway. They want you to do
right.
your work. So yeah.
Well, it sounds like you've figured out a really great way to navigate that relationship and the kind of like fulfillment on both ends. So great
Yeah.
work. Okay, we have a few minutes left. If anybody has any questions for Carol and for Catherine, um, we've got a question in the chat, which I can answer. And then if anyone else has any questions, please feel free to just like raise your hand or turn your camera on. But Robin asks if you have recommendation for kind of like you touched on this a little bit, Catherine, also like on negotiating custom work and pricing, and as the market value is sort of increasing, like how you navigate those changes. It sounds like some of this is often facilitated by a gallery, so I don't know how much of this kind of pricing of your own work you two do or have done, but if you have any thoughts for Robin.
Yeah.
I just want to, if I can butt in,
Mhm.
um, the one thing I want to say now, I'm talking about artists that are emerging. And I've had a lot of trouble actually with artists. They understand about commission and stuff like that, but then they continue to sell their work at a different price. And that is, I was very lucky in that my first gallery made that completely clear. You don't do that, right? And this is in my era, there was no Instagram. So selling your own work meant you literally had to go to like an arts, like a show or something. And I was actually in the Nova Scotia designer shows a few times because I did printmaking and they consider that a craft. But so I'm interested to hear about, well, Catherine's response, because that has continued to be a problem. And so I'm now, and even in discussion with the artists, they'll go, well, I gotta make some money, and it's never going to sell for what you sell, because the people that come into your but people learn very, very quickly. So I used to donate a lot of art to these huge events in Halifax for charity, and I learned very quickly I was happy to do it because I wanted to give something. But you never get sales, because I would be approached by people who could afford to go to a gallery, but if they went to the auction, they got it cheaper. So I now, eventually I said, I will donate a piece, but it has to be the same price. And as a result, I wasn't asked for, like, it has to be gallery price. I'm not going to be giving deals at these. It's not fair to the galleries that I was in. So anyway, over to you, Catherine.
Yeah, I totally agree. You have to maintain a consistent price point, and be very transparent with your galleries. And I get approached, by people saying, can I just buy through you? And I don't want to pay the gallery price. Well, it's the same price. This is the value of my work and this is what it sells for. And to undermine that is, it's damaging to the gallery and the artist. I think it's just devalues the work. And same with like auctions and stuff. Sorry. When if I donate a piece or give a piece for auction, the price, the minimum bid starts at the value. So, or earlier this year, a piece was purchased from me at value. So I get the value of the painting and then they donate the painting to the auction. And still there's a minimum bid. So it's really, yeah, it's really important to maintain, the value of the artwork. And with, the pricing of my work, it's been something, that I've worked together with the galleries over the years, and we've just slowly kind of increased based on the market demand. And there was a time where my work would just, sell out, and there would be no inventory until I painted more. And I found that was, you kind of want to push up against that a little bit and find the right balance of, I want to, I don't, it's wonderful to sell out all your work, but it's almost like then you won't have any more work for another 6 months or something. So you want to find a good balance. And we just kept slowly, finding the right place for that, and working together on the prices. But yeah, if I was on my own, it's hard to price your own work. So I appreciate having the galleries, like, kind of not tell me, but encourage me, this is what the work is worth. This is the value, because selling my own or pricing my own work would just be like, I just would hate putting like a dollar value on, my work. So yeah, I appreciate the galleries working with me to do that.
There's another question here that is probably also a bit of artist answer and maybe galleries answer, and it's about shipping. And somebody's wondering if the size of the work matters. If you're shipping it far, are small works maybe less desirable for the market? But also, they're wondering, Catherine, how you, I imagine this is maybe in regards to your commissions, how you ship your work, if you're responsible for that at all.
Yeah, so usually, up until now, I haven't had a gallery in Halifax. So I've always constantly shipping work out. It's the worst part of the job, honestly. Yeah. It causes so much stress. But there's there's one company that's very like specific to artists, but and galleries, but one company called Faro Shipping, and they drive across Canada every month, and they only pick up art and deliver art. So they're amazing. But yeah, international shipping, I really don't like it. And if it's at the gallery, though, the gallery takes care of that. So that's the other benefit of the gallery, like doing shipping stuff. But I like to work large. So that's always a problem. Like my husband builds crates for me, and I'm like, I got a couple big paintings on the go, and I'm like, there's going to be a big crate in order for you. And yeah, it's a challenge, but and it's also stressful sending your work out. But yeah, I try to create them as carefully as possible to reduce damage, but it's not a fun part of the job.
Under what temperature of light do you paint? There's a conversation about how sometimes the lighting in our homes is different than the lighting in our galleries. And do you have recommendations for the best light under which to paint?
Well,
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, Catherine, go ahead.
Okay, well, I just we built this studio onto our house like 3 years ago. Anyway, I got specifically light to work under. So I don't know if you can see the track lighting up here. It goes around the room. So I have some of the lights on there are replicate daylight. So they're very cool. So and there's a lot of windows in here. So I tried to get as much natural light in here as possible and to work under natural light. And then there's other bulbs on it that are warmer. So more like typical gallery lighting. So if people come in here to view lighting, it's not such a harsh, like cool light. But yeah, I think I prefer like as much natural looking light as possible when I work.
Yeah, that's, I'll make a quick comment here, only because maybe if people they don't have the funding to put in. When I was in ASCAD already, Ed Porter told us what lights to get. And believe it or not, it was fluorescent, and but it was a daylight fluorescent. And I have painted under those for the rest of my life. It has the new LED is awful, but they're improving. And I have huge curtains on my windows to keep the daylight out because it's too changing. If I had a north facing studio, that would be fine. But yeah, you want to move, you want to take your painting off the easel and you want to go around your apartment or your house or your balcony or whatever, and you do want to look at it in different ways. But the light that's going to be at the gallery is, galleries, I have gallery lights. And so if anything, they make things look brighter than when it's in the home. And that can be a problem if people get a little shocked by how the impact they have, but I think they get over it. They love the painting, but by the end of the week, they can't live without it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the lighting, the paintings can look so different. And sometimes like it might suggest to a collector, like getting a light, on the painting once it's installed in their home. And yeah, it's funny you said that about a north facing studio, because we put like these skylights in and everyone comes in, they're like, you put the skylights on the wrong side, not the south side. And we're like, no, we did that intentionally because we want indirect light. So there's actually like no direct sunlight that comes in here. Because when I used to work in my apartment, there'd be like a beam of sun traveling across my living room every day, and it's very difficult to work.
Yeah. And Catherine, do you also find, because I live on the ocean in Chester and I have a beautiful view, people come in and there's all these raggedy 2 layers of curtains that I've just recycled from my house, and they're like, what the hell is going on here? And they say, well, and I say, I can't compete with nature. I don't want to be looking at nature. I just want to be looking at my easel. I don't need that distraction out there. And so that, they think people, of course, and that's fine, but people think we sit in our window like, oh,
yeah,
I
know.
It's
like, it's romanticized on Instagram and stuff a lot. I see some people working and I'm like, that's not realistic. They can't work under that light. And it's like, it just looks nice in the real.
yeah.
Well, thank you both so much for chatting with us today. It was so great to hear about both of your practices. Everybody watching, go buy art from Katharine and Carol. Go look at their websites. There's lots to see. And if you enjoyed this talk, please join us next month for our next artwork. And yeah, Katharine and Carol, thank you again for chatting with us today.